In this episode of the Orange Nerd Show, I am joined by AliaaAloha and Mr. VashSky. We're talking all about the writer's strike, all the ramifications with what this means for our favorite content, what this means in terms of AI. We're also going to talk about Guardians of the Galaxy 3, the box office projections. That's very interesting. We're going to talk all about it up next on the Orange Nerd Show. Welcome aboard to another episode of the Orange Nerd Show, where we talk all about the industry. We talk about nerd culture, Star Wars, Marvel, C-suite, all that good stuff. So we're going to break down this writer strike. There's a lot going on with that. We're going to break down Guardians of the Galaxy 3 in its box office. But before we do that, I want to introduce my fantastic panel. We are joined once again by the lovely AliaaAloha. Thank you so much for joining us, Alia.
Hey, hello. Hi there. And I'm AliaaAloha on Twitter. Tweet.
Tweet. Follow her on Twitter. Absolutely. And I will link her Twitter in the description, so you can just go ahead and click on that and you're good to go. Just make sure you follow her. She's absolutely phenomenal. Thank you again, Alia, for coming on. And right over here, we got Mr. VashSky, Dr. Dre, the host of Freshly Squeezed. Welcome back, brother.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the introduction. I do appreciate it, and I appreciate you having me on, because this is some interesting subject matter that we're going to get into. Very, very interesting. But before we get to that, if you guys want to follow me on Twitter, you can go ahead and do so right down there at VashSky, just below the avatar there. Just go ahead and type that in, and it should pop up for, as Christine Waysons McCarthy would say, for all the robust discussion right there. I'm trying without the voice changer. I'm trying. Okay. And if you want to see me, well, you can go ahead and subscribe to the channel you're watching right now at OrangeNerd, where we have some amazing shows, including Citrus Corner, Story Geeks with Jay, OrangeNerd, which is what you're watching right now, and my own Freshly Squeezed, your source for juice news and info, squeezed fresh right from the Grove.
Perfect. And you don't have your soundboard, so hold on. We got to do a soundboard. We got to do a drop, because there we go.
There you go.
Doesn't feel right without one.
I know, right? It's you gotta have one.
Gotta have it. So let's dive into this. This is crazy. This is absolutely crazy. As if Hollywood hasn't had enough issues. They had to add one more thing to the plate, right? So. Hollywood's writers are on strike. Here are 5 things you need to know. And basically the rundown to kind of set the table says here on Tuesday, 11,500 members of the Writers Guild of America went on strike. Since talks with Hollywood studios began March 20th, the two sides have failed to reach an accord on a new 3-year film TV contract to replace the one that expired on Monday. A long strike could have a ripple effect on not only film and television production, but also the Southern California economy. Okay, the impact is also likely to be felt in Georgia, New York, New Mexico, and other production hubs nationwide. Without writers, scripted television shows will struggle to continue filming, and live late-night shows will stop immediately. So as you can see, this is a pretty significant turn of events. Dre, initial thoughts, general thoughts about this strike overall?
Yeah, I mean, this is the largest writer's strike that we've seen for, 15 years. I believe the last one was around 2007, if I recall correctly. Around the
2008.
eve of, yeah. Well, I believe the negotiations started, like the whole process started in 2007. It wasn't resolved until 2008.
Oh, gotcha.
Very interesting. Right before the Great Recession, right there, which is interesting how history repeats itself almost. Right?
Yeah.
This is absolutely fascinating. I mean, look, this is a very transformative time, and so I suppose it makes sense that through this transition, things like this would actually happen. I remember the original writer strike as a teenager at that point, and I still read historical documentation and historical accounts that reference the writer strike and how upending it was for the entire industry. In fact, a little fun fact about this: the Simpsons ride at Universal Studios Hollywood was actually benefited from the writer's strike because, well, the writers who usually write jokes for a show like The Simpsons weren't able to work. So they contributed to the writing process for the actual attraction itself and infused it with all kinds of jokes. Some that may have outworn their welcome, of course. But yeah, I mean, you know, it does affect not only your the shows that you watch, the productions they screen, but also even to the theme park space, it could be consequential in ways that you didn't actually foresee. Look, I think there's this is a rapidly changing industry. We'll get into some of those changes, AI, the streaming wars, and so forth, and how that has radically changed things. But I think this is predictable that something like this would occur.
Yeah. It's crazy to me to think that you were a teenager in 2007, and I'm over here getting a colonoscopy tomorrow. Like, wow, what a difference in age!
That time flies.
Woo! And Alia, if you could kind of share your initial thoughts on the strike and what you think it might mean for the industry overall.
Well, in general, I'm one that kind of defers to unions, support unions, and all that because. Without unions, I mean, yes, there are corrupt realities with unions, but also unions brought a lot of good things. Without unions, we wouldn't have breaks and child labor laws and things like that. So I do tend to respect and to defer to what the unions prefer. At the same time, though, I do try to put my business tiara hat on and try to understand where the bosses, the studios and them are coming from. One thing I kind of recall from the previous large strike is that because of that, that's how the reality shows were able to rise to the surface because they needed to put something on the TV. And there are reports, though, that it also is what hurt shows that seem to have promising starts. I remember I saw a recent Twitter thread discussion about how it affected Heroes. Heroes had a great start, then the strike happened, and that's when the writing kind of went downhill.
That was such a great show.
And that's why the show went downhill because of the strike. So.
Oh,
that sucks.
Yeah.
Well, and that's why it's really important for people, if you're a fan of content, and who isn't really, that's why this writer strike is so important to follow, because like what happened to Heroes. I mean,
that's why people are worried about House of the Dragon, because House of the Dragon is going to continue on, and they say that they won't need last minute rewrites or anything, and that's why people are worried now about House of the Dragon.
Well, Ollie, I would put your mind to ease, because David Zaslav said that the love of working will end the strike. So love will conquer the day. Don't even stress over that.
Spoken like a true showman.
I saw the writers mocking that.
Yeah, that was interesting. But let's we're going to dive into the meat and potatoes here a little bit with this. But first, before we go any further, I'll start with you, Dre. Then I'll go back down to Alia. Overall, where do you stand personally, Dre, on this? Like, are you kind of like, hey, like, you know, I'm team writers right now, and they're absolutely correct, and the studios are just being greedy? Do you think that the studios are correct, or is there a little gray area, a little nuance in this whole situation? Where do you kind of stand with this?
I think there's definitely nuance. Here, I think some of the demands, asked by the writers are a little bit like, I don't know how it's gonna fly in a rapidly changing industry like the one we're actually seeing now. But others, it's like, okay, well, if I was part of the union, well, then you absolutely have to be fighting these things and have to be requesting these things and so forth. So it's like I think it's line by line on a case by case basis. I'm kind of with one camp or another here. Look, this will disrupt productions. There's no question about this. It's just to what extent and for how long, honestly, is the sentiment out there right now, and one affects the other. So that's kind of why, even with that LA Times article that you bring up there, I kind of wanted to go through the steps in order to kind of better parse out kind of what I feel and what the panel feels as well.
Oh, what are your overall thoughts in regards to this whole writer strike? Like, where do you stand on this side of the war, so to speak? Is it with the writers? Is it with the studios, or is it somewhere in between? You know, there is a little bit of nuance here. So,
well, everything has nuance and gray areas, but I lean more towards the writers. I side more with the writers, but I do emphasize and understand that there is nuance and gray with everything.
yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. And speaking of the studios, speaking of the studios demand showrunners work during the writer strike. Letters to striking writer producers from the studios, including those owned by Warner Brothers and Disney, state that they must perform non-writing duties and may be obligated to act against their guild's own mandates. Now, keep in mind, if they do act against the guild's mandates, they can be fined for that as well. So this is a pretty serious thing. Dre, what are your thoughts on this one? This is interesting.
Yeah, speaking of those fines from the guilds themselves, the letter actually went on to say this specifically. It says, we want to specifically reiterate to you that as a showrunner or other writer producer, that you are not excused from performing your duties as a showrunner and or producer on your series as a result of the WGA strike. WGA, the Writers Guild of America, just kind of fill the viewers in with the parlance here. Your personal services agreement with the studio requires that you perform your showrunner and or producing duties, even if the Writers Guild of America attempts to fine you for performing such services during the strike. So they're saying, hey, even if you do, even if you do have a fine there, well, you got to pay it because that's what you agreed to here. I think Matt Bellany was talking about the distinct possibility that if this is a mandate across the industry, and if all of those people affected specifically seek to sit out, what effect would that have? Would you go after all of them? Would you fire all of them? Would they be let go? Would you, continue on? I mean, that's an interesting. It's interesting. I don't know, potential fallout from the situation here.
Well, and it also kind of gives Disney kind of a barometer as to some of these creatives like loyalty to the mouse, right? So you have a writer that's willing to do that for Disney and play ball. I wonder how that affects that writer's future with Disney, and the ones that don't do that, how does that impact them? So it's very, very interesting indeed. I gotta say though, a lot of people give Disney a lot of crap for kind of like the company, it has changed so much over 100 years, right? And they've kind of lost sight of like Walt Disney and his vision. We hear that a lot, right? Whether you believe that or not, that's, but that is a conversation out there. I will say though, this is a very Walt Disney thing. I'm sure Walt Disney would have said, "Get back to work."
Get back to work. Yeah. Oh, that's for sure.
Get back to work, you commies, right?
yeah. That's probably how he would have worded it, actually. Going back to the Disney strike, Disney felt personally betrayed. He felt personally like inflicted by all of this, which is why Roy was like, "Oh, okay, you got to go to South America because you can't speak objectively."
I'll handle this. You go.
But I'll tell you, I mean, he never forgave the people who actually struck against him, and slowly but surely, he worked to remove their presence from the studio as the ensuing years went on. Right there, because that bad blood just maintained, and unfortunately, Walt couldn't. He couldn't see why people would strike against him, and he has his own theories as to why that may have happened, which are interesting to say the least. But to get back to our contemporary times, we talk about solidarity and how if multiple interested parties actually get involved. It's interesting. Recently, I believe around 3 days ago, the Writers Guild of America met at the shrine with not only their own members, but also with SAG, or the Screen Actors Guild, the IATSE, which is the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, and the DGA, which I believe is the Directors Guild of America. They all,
that's huge.
The Teamsters, the laborers unions, all of those met at the same place at the same time, which I guess some of those unions have negotiations with the studios for themselves coming up, I believe, on June 30th. Some of them coincide with another. And if that happens, are we talking about a potential work stoppage for all productions in general?
Well, and that's and a lot of these creatives, these unions or whatever too. They smell blood in the water. Like right now, Hollywood in general is kind of going through it. So this really puts the screws into these studios. Like we can do major damage at a time when you're already struggling. What are your thoughts on this, Alia?
When I found out that news that and I think it was leadership too, which says a lot too, that the leadership of the DGA, IATSE, and that's all the below the line people who are very crucial and important too for productions, and SAG-AFTRA, the Actors Guild. SAG is Screen Actors Guild. AFTRA, I don't quite remember what it stands for, but I think it's like the commercial actors and all that. When they pretty much were all there and showing an agreement, locking of arms, that is something. So I think the studios or executives might be nervous, but they're not going to show it right now. It's way too early in negotiations.
Yeah.
Well, it tells you that they may have moved a little bit too far too fast with the streaming era and didn't necessarily get all
think of payout.
Yeah.
Because there's back ends with theatrical and with broadcasting and cable, and there's none of that with streaming. So
that's an interesting kind of discussion. Let's kind of dive into that a little deeper. Like,
okay.
So what do you think this means for streaming, Dre? Like, what do you think this? Because you're right. This is something like the whole the head first into streaming has kind of it wasn't just a few people. It looks like the industry kind of got high on this idea of these platforms, these streaming platforms, right?
Yeah.
And they went all in. Disney, Warner, all of them. Really, they all did. But then now it's kind of like the next day hangover, and they're realizing, well, this stuff isn't working out for us.
Correct.
Now with this talent issue and all that going on, very much connected to streaming, like where does this lead us?
Well, some interesting places, that's for sure. I mean, the first, I think, big indicator that something wasn't right was with the Scarlett Johansson lawsuit. We saw, I mean, that was one of the first times ever that big name talent had sued a studio like that. Obviously, with the backing of her agency as well. You know, in order to sue for royalties, in order to sue for stuff that, you know, she felt that she wasn't being entitled to. And I actually agreed with her argument. And felt that Disney didn't necessarily tie up all loose ends regarding that situation. And I said at the time that left a point of vulnerability for Chapek, which eventually caught up to him, as we all know. But that was kind of the first time where it was like, something's not right here. And I believe Warner Brothers did the preventative measure in order to realign their contracts before they dedicated, I believe, what was it, the 2021 slate to streaming?
Day and date.
Yeah. Day and date, yeah. So they
paid
kind
up
of worked
front
it out
to make up for the back end. Yeah.
Exactly.
Like the best case scenario for every movie. So.
Right, and that may fulfill some big name talent in front of the camera, but what about the people behind? And so I think this has been a point of contention with Hollywood, going back some years, maybe even predating the streaming wars as we currently know them. So one of the things that the Writers Guild of America is asking for is transparency regarding the numbers attached to these streaming programs. Now, you know, us following it here, we've talked about before how, like, you know, we have Samba to go after, and then we have Nielsen to kind of use to cover all of these things. But we know that there's discrepancies between both of them sometimes. So clearly, the way that they're, you know, retrieving their data isn't consistent. And, you know, if you're writing for residuals or royalties, how are you supposed to calculate exactly what you are supposed to be paid based on, you know, these kind of independent agencies that don't have direct access to these numbers, you know? And OG, we've talked about how there really should be transparency in this space. If for no other reason than for advertisers, how are advertising agencies and companies supposed to be, valuing, how much they're paying for their products to be showcased during the commercial breaks on these streaming networks? I mean, how are you supposed to to negotiate rates between different organizations, between different shows and so forth, when you don't even have access to the numbers yourself? This is a big problem that the entire industry is facing. And I do give credit that the Writers Guild of America is asking for that. I think that should be asked. Will they get it? I'm not so sure, especially with those royalties fees, right? Because Hollywood has for a long time screwed everybody out of royalties.
If the DGA or SAG wants it, though, there's a good chance it'll happen.
Oh, you think so? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I just think they're unfortunately, I think there might have to be legislation on this issue because because it's just the transparency isn't there, and it really should be there.
Definitely. I agree. Yeah. Nielsen's not enough. I mean, it gives a good idea, but more is needed. Yeah. And the streamers know, they just need to reveal it. So.
Right. And it's as a fan, even it's frustrating, right? Because you have a favorite show, right? Like I love Mandalorian, and I want to know how it's doing, and it's like it's frustrating waiting so long to get any kind of numbers, and it's just I don't know.
The month Nielsen's a month delayed, so.
What about shareholders as well? I mean, this could be an SEC problem as well, right?
Oh, interesting. With all the companies that are involved with streaming, that's a good point.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you're, let's say you're a big company like Netflix, and the success of your shows that you put out are directly tied to viewer engagement and subscriber growth and stuff like that. You got to know those numbers.
It's true.
They definitely know. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So, I think there really should be some transparency here. It's shocking that we've gone so long without it.
Yeah, absolutely. Ali, what are your overall thoughts on this? Like the studios demanding their showrunners to work during the writer's strike. I don't think we got your view on that. Like, what are your thoughts on this?
They're just trying to do a wedge to reveal weakness in the armor, so to speak. I don't think they really think anyone's going to, because just the risk of being fined and in trouble with your union is just such a huge sword over the head, even bigger than studios demanding you get back to work. But I think they're hoping for behind the scenes debates, just to have a weakness within the unions themselves so that it's not as much of a united front as they meet the studios. So it's a little bit of the game from the studios, including, yes, Disney.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I also do want to point out off topic up here, it says King Charles III coronation concert. That little shout out to our boy Ron DeSantis, huh?
Yeah, the coronation is pretty big there.
Long live Lilibet.
So we're moving on to our next little tidbit on this whole writer strike. This is from Matthew Bellani, who we're all at OG55. We're all big fans of Matthew. He's really awesome, really great source of news and really smart analysis overall. But he tweeted out last night, I revealed that Disney is demanding showrunners perform producing duties, but it's certainly not alone. The others will expect producers to fulfill those duties on shows in production. Big question is, what happens if they refuse? Yeah, that is interesting, right? Like, what if they refuse? What's going to happen? Like we've all talked, all you just mentioned, I think she's right. The axe over their head from the union is scarier than the studio. Mm-hmm. So what happens if they go against the studio? What does this mean? This is an interesting kind of kerfluffle, to say the least. What do you think? What do you think, Dre? You think that they're gonna ignore these studios and just kind of follow the union, or you think there's a chance any of these people are gonna?
There's a chance that all of them could walk out. There's a chance that they could get in contact with each other and say, "We're not gonna do this," and then walk out because their credits are probably on the line as well with regards to their writing duties. So that's an interesting kind of thing there, and that solidarity might have might have impacts across the board here. So Matt Bellany actually put out a series of articles on this, as you could probably surmise. And one of those was the harsh realities of the writer's strike. And one of the last lines here that he gives out for free is this one right here. I thought this was pretty interesting. No, that's not good news for those of us who, perhaps naively, hope that the director's negotiation would go more smoothly than the writers. Again, their deal is coming up as well on June 30th. And the DGA deal, Directors Guild of America, as well as the one for SAG, or AFTRA, which is Screen Actors Guild, and AFTRA means, I believe,
do you want me to Google it now? Find out.
No, I haven't. I just,
you have it?
I was, sorry. Let me see here. It's
I think
the
it's
American
the
Federation of Television and Radio Artists. There you go.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
I had the notes. I just didn't have them on me. The Actors Union, that also has a June 30th deadline, could help nudge the writers and studio towards a resolution. Quote, "It's a very dark sign," says Jonathan Handel, the entertainment lawyer and guild expert who contributes to Puck, told me when I relayed the news. Of course, if the directors and or actors also strike and everything scripted except the Universal Studios Tramp tour shuts down, we all go to the beach for the summer and probably longer. So that was, a pretty funny way. Obviously, we're a theme park channel, so I thought I got a little kick out of that.
To mention, yeah.
I mean, he's right. If the what is it? Producer, screenwriters, showrunner, screenwriters, if they all kind of take a bow, does that cascade into more people connected with the production pipeline? Also joining in on this, because, well, not only are their credits at issue, but also their negotiations are coming up. It's bad, right?
It's bad. It's bad. And actually, it gets even kind of worse. Here, let me go ahead and share my screen real quick. The AI revolution has already reached the studio's gates, and Disney's Bob Iger may be the only CEO who can stop it. And I'll go ahead and read a little bit here for the viewers at home. For weeks, multiple studios and streamers have been planning to use AI to generate scripts based on books and other IP that is in the public domain, with lists of titles making the rounds amongst development executives. Multiple insiders have told Above the Line. I'm reliably told that nearly every studio has already explored this possibility, and that should those plans come to fruition over the few weeks and likely months to come, the studios plan to hire writers to rewrite those scripts once the writer strike is over. That is, of course, a major sticking point in these negotiations, as the WGA is insistent that AI not be used to create any literary material whatsoever. Not only is this a sticking point, I think this is the point. I think this is one of the big reasons why we're seeing such a line in the sand with this strike. What are your thoughts on this, Ollie, with AI and its importance and relevance to this whole strike?
So what's interesting, I think initially with the strike, the focus was they want the numbers. They don't want to wait for Nielsen in a month or only rely on Nielsen. They want the numbers. They want the transparency, because the issue is with the residuals that regardless if you have a huge hit like Wednesday or if your show is canceled after a month, you get the same amount of money, and they want to be able to be rewarded for a hit like Wednesday, which I totally get that point.
Yeah.
But as the negotiations were happening, they also, as an aside, mention AI as their concern. And the studio's response is, I think, what made the writers the hair stand on the back of their necks, right, and start to focus on it more, and why that is now, yes, the big deal, the line in the sand, because they bring it up, but the studios were just like, no, we don't want to talk about it. We'll meet once a year. They just were, it was sus, as everybody says. It was suspicious. One writer pointed out, it's like asking someone not to shoot you in the stomach, and someone says in response, well, I don't know if I can promise that. And you're like, wait, what?
Exactly.
Oh yeah. Well, and Alia, you and I watch a gentleman on YouTube, Den of Nerds, Josh, and he was talking the other day.
He's very pro AI.
Oh yeah, he's very pro AI, and he was kind of talking about like one of the examples he used was I think it was like film developers, right? Like, but back in the day when you would go develop your photos, and there's that, you know, the red room and then the liquid, right? They do the whole thing, and then now with digital, I mean, that replaces that job, right? It's no longer needed necessarily. So, and his whole idea was like, you know, technology moves forward, and as technology moves forward, it's going to inevitably replace certain jobs, you know. And while that's sad, do we as a society, as an industry in general, do we not progress because Jim and Sally are going to lose their job, right? And I think he makes an interesting point. But I mean, this is the issue, though, that a lot of these folks in Hollywood are unionized, and they're not going to go out without a fight. Like, they're not going to just let you, like, you know, do this, like, you know, potentially replace their job. And it's going to get really, really.
What AI does, that they find that insulting.
Well, like, yeah, I don't blame them.
The
cleanup, right? The cleanup team. I mean, it is insulting. Absolutely. What are your thoughts on this, Dre? This AI revolution?
It's an interesting way. This above the line article here. It's an interesting way that AI would be implemented, right? Because it's like the data set is what is the hardest thing in order to create a great AI algorithm that could, you know, produce content work for you. And so basing it off of literary works that are in the public domain right now that could be adapted, that's a really interesting way to go about that quandary right there. There's your data set is the book, or, you know, literary material that already exists. Does this apply to, I don't know, remakes and stuff like that? That's a really interesting thing. But there would have to be a human hand in there at some point, and so that's why they want to have these writers do cleanup work or mop work essentially for these AI algorithms, which is I do agree with you, Ollie. It's a little bit demeaning, and yeah, I mean, I guess, you know, according to what you're saying here, Ollie, which I fully believe, once the writers kind of were like intimating, hey, we don't want this to be used, and this kind of cagey response from the studios, yeah, I would understand why you would add that to the negotiation terms that precipitated the strike here. It's interesting because the alliance of motion picture producers and television producers, I believe is what it's called. The studios essentially have responded to some of these terms that have been put out by the WGA. And on AI specifically, it says this, and I'll go ahead and read it for you guys. AI. We are creative companies, and we value the work of creatives. The best stories are original, insightful, and often come from people's own experiences. Okay. AI raises hard, important, creative, and legal questions for everyone. It does. For example, writers want to be able to use this technology as part of their creative process without changing how credits are determined, which is complicated given AI material can't be copyrighted. So it's something that requires a lot more discussion, which we've committed to doing. Also, it's important to note that the current WGA agreement already defines a writer, quote, a writer, to exclude any, quote, corporate or impersonal purveyor of literary material, meaning that only a, quote, person can be considered a writer and enjoy the terms and conditions of the basic agreement. For example, AI-generated material would not be eligible for the writing credit. I think that walks around what's really at issue. It's not really the credits going to some AI algorithm. That's at issue.
The replacement.
Yes, yeah, it's using AI in general that could replace a lot of jobs, right? And it's like, that's kind of missing the point there. So it's a really interesting thing. Also, too, you know, with ChatGPT and some of these other you know, AI services that you can find online, a lot of these are just in testing phases, and the use of them, there isn't kind of any what is it? There's no monetary necessity in order to use these services, right? What happens when these things go out of testing modes and have to be used? There's a price put on their usage. You know, that's going to change up the dynamic as well, because there are already models and so forth that take advantage of ChatGPT processes and other AI processes that incorporate, you know, that utilize their functionality. But what happens when those go away? and be put behind a paywall,
That's
or
a good point.
have to be licensed out. This is a very it's a burgeoning new technological revolution that we're on right here, but with a lot of open questions. So I will agree that if you're a union looking to protect the interests of writers, yeah, you'd want to strike on this. I fully get it. The question is, and I think OG, I think you touched on this, is the progress of technology so much that there's no union negotiation that can stave it off? And is it going to be the free market that will dictate how much AI is actually going to be used? Very interesting.
Yeah, it is. I do have some. Hey, look, AI is hitting all corners of the industry, including us here at OG55. This is a beta test.
Oh
scary
no!
Scary
A
stuff,
fellow
guys.
guest.
Here we go. Like,
no, absolutely, I agree with you. I agree with you.
What I'm saying?
They're like mirrored to each other.
Like, I mean, it's wild. Yeah, scary stuff, guys. Scary stuff.
Man, we're gonna be replaced.
You and Trey. Here's you and Trey. I've seen some tweets, and shoot that I didn't make a note of it, but I've seen some from forward-thinking, technologically loving WGA members, and they acknowledge that, maybe it'll replace Wikipedia when you research something or things like that. They acknowledge things like that, but they want safeguards in the contract or in the agreement between the WGA and the studio about that. They don't want it Wild West.
It's so interesting, this whole discussion about AI in the creative space, because it's a lot of people felt that no, you're fine. Hey, OG does that occasionally, but it was felt for a long time that the creative space is fine. We're fine. We're good. We don't have to contend with machines maybe replacing our jobs because we're creative, right? And now we have AI that can extract a data set and actually be creative in itself. And it's like, ooh, what does this mean for the creative industries?
That is a good point you make about paywall or licensing. What if these companies charge so much that it costs more than hiring a handful of writers?
Microsoft has just moved a lot of its workforce towards its AI division, and I mean they're spending upwards of billions of dollars into this space right here. Google's actually freaking out because they're kind of behind the 8 ball when it comes to the AI game, and they think even Google searches might be replaced, right? Because people are using services like ChatGPT and so forth in order to get their information. They just ask a question. They can have a whole response generated for them on the fly rather than having a 10 links or whatever provided for them. So Google's kind of freaking out about this. This is going to upend the entire technological field for sure. But when it comes to the creative space, I mean, we have lawyers right now who are using AI to file their briefs.
So they're replacing their legal assistants or their
and
legal
then they just sign
secretaries.
off on it pro hoc vice. And now it's through them, so to speak, but they're handling legal briefs. You have students right now handling their essays using ChatGPT.
That upsets
something on
teachers and professors. Yeah, they're trying to find a way to find out what's the student and what's the AI generated essay.
Exactly. Yeah, and there are little things that you can find right now, but I believe the 4th revision of ChatGPT, I believe GTP4 is coming out right here, so. Who knows how the language model will actually be transformed over that time, but it's changing rapidly.
Your writing style or words you like to use a lot. That's chilling.
Yeah. Would you have to come up with an AI model to counter the AI, right? Like, right? It was just created.
Like you have a spy to counter the spy.
It's kind of like Pacific Rim, right? They had to build these gigantic things to defeat the giant monster, right? Like, that's crazy. This is wild.
But this is happening right now. So I mean, it's telling how the studio is like, well, I mean, you say that you want a contract ensuring that we don't shoot you in the belly, but
But
it's a little
we might shoot
premature,
you in the
guys.
belly. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But
Now
you make
we
a good
know that
point. Those
writers
licensing and paywalls might cost more than hiring a few writers, though, and then that way the studios are maybe a little too excited about this without knowing
exactly
all the information.
right,
Well, and
we know
we've
writers might employ this technology themselves. Go ahead, OG.
yeah, and we've had that problem with Hollywood recently. We're still going through it. We're getting a little too excited about something new, streaming, and
That's right. They haven't learned anything. The studios.
come on, and there's nothing wrong with new technology. I'm all about new technology. I'm all about moving forward. Walt Disney was all about that, but you have to have a little bit of
humanity in your decisions, or
humanity and a little bit of you can't just dive in without thinking. You have to kind of the streaming in and of itself is not a bad thing. It's actually it's a great tool for consumers to have. Just one more thing is it's you have unlimited content at your fingertips. That's a good thing for consumers, and it can be a good thing for studios.
Sure.
But unfortunately, the studios, though, they got too excited. They ran right in and it shot them in the foot. And I think the same thing here with this AI stuff is that you go in head first. Like you said, Alia, it might be more expensive in the long run. You got to really think about this stuff before you get too deep. So I hope they're not making the same mistake that they made with streaming, because
it is interesting how Above the Line, kind of an aside, it hit me. Above the Line and Bellany are both mentioning, it is interesting, they both mentioned Bob Iger might be the negotiator, the ultimate negotiator with all this, because he's someone that both sides trust inherently, which is interesting. But right now he's staying out of it. So.
What hasn't he said before, though, about AI generated art? Remember, he said that during his town hall initially that he had with the studio as soon as he came in, right? That he was asked about AI generated art and said that it's something probably will pursue at some point, but not right now. So he's kind of like open to the possibility of AI contributing to the creative process.
He is, but I think that he would be
kind of like Walt, cautious about it. Or
I think so, because look at how Iger approached streaming compared to that of Bob Chapek. Like Iger,
a late bloomer.
Yeah, Iger was very much like Iger was very much like, it's a thing, but we're not going to go like all in. Like, we're not going to replace theatrical and what have you. Where Bob Chapek was like, oh no, we don't care. We're doing streaming, And so, and I remember we would read all these trades, during that whole time when Chapek was in there. And I remember hearing Iger being critical of Bob Chapek for that, going too all in on streaming and completely ignoring theatrical. I can kind of see Bob Iger be, kind of not all in on AI. I'm not saying he's adverse to it, but I don't think he'd be all in on it as like a Bob Chapek would. I think that Iger is a little bit more of a traditionalist when it comes to the industry. We've seen it with theatrical. I think we'll see it with AI, and I think that might be. But I think that might be why they're turning to Bob Iger, because they know that he's not as bullish as some of these other studios.
Yeah, he's a little bit more legacy than some of these other studios, which is surprising because in the past he has said, well, it's better to be ahead of the curve than behind it, right? That we are in a transformative industry all the time. This goes back to when he worked at ABC and how when he started working at ABC, how they, the big kind of challenge to them was cable television and the rise of that and how that transformed the industry and so forth. So I can see Iger maybe initially taking a stance saying, hey, maybe we forego AI at least for this negotiation period.
Yeah.
But I mean, he's only going to be there for 2 years, right? So
that's true.
Does this come up again? Even if it does work out in their favor now, how long does it staved off? That's the question, I think.
No, it's the dam will break eventually. The dam will absolutely break eventually, and they might be able to hold it off for a little while, but
there are people who are attempting to stave that off right now, right? So, for example, or let's say reinforcing the dam. For example, like Elon Musk recently had an interview saying that there should be regulation for AI right now before it actually turns into an issue in order to protect certain jobs, workforces, industries, and so forth like that. So there, you're already seeing pushback from
that guy that recently left Google. He's considered they said the godfather or grandfather of AI. Yeah, he's expressed concern.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe Hollywood actually produced a series of films going over AI. I think it's the Terminator franchise. Might want to look into
it. True.
They're like, oh, we just produced it. We didn't pay attention.
Yeah, exactly.
That's true. Very, very.
Oh, do you want to discuss the scenarios or?
Oh yes. Oh, you know what? I am so sorry. I totally forgot. Give me one second. Let me go ahead and get to that screen real quick. Yeah, I'm jumping the gun here. Okay, so this is from
jumping the James gun. There you go.
I'm jumping the James gun. This is courtesy of Alia. This is from Matt Bellani, the different scenarios. Okay, so let's go through each of these. This is very, very interesting. So this is the potential July scenario. If both the DGA and SAG-AFTRA make deals at the end of June, the writers will find themselves on a lonely island and will likely settle. What do you guys think about that? Do you think this is likely?
Based on that recent meeting at the Shrine Auditorium, unless they're lying to the face of the WGA people, I would say that one is not likely.
What do you think, Dre?
It seems like they're scheming in order to kind of see that not only their demands are met, but also putting in a plan so that if this is a long enough strike, what their members are going to do and so forth, and how many of their terms are viable. So it looked like it was a strategic meeting in order to prolong this whole strike. So I don't see the July scenario myself personally.
Yeah, unfortunately.
And to give people a timeline, the last strike, which is 2007, 2008, about 100 days.
Yeah, I think we're probably looking around there too this time around. We'll see, but 100 days would bring us, definitely around September. So the September scenario from Matt Bellani says the fall broadcast schedule is impacted. The movie pipeline begins to suffer. The Emmys are threatened, and the companies feel they have made their cost cuts over the summer and can justify giving a little to make a deal. What do you think about that, Dre? You think that is a possibility? September?
Maybe. Obviously, you don't want to see that. You don't want to see your entertainment pipeline too impacted. And assuming they can stave off an all-out work stoppage, yeah, that might be something. Also, too, I think what Disney's fiscal year ends in September, right? And then it starts again
October 1st, I believe, is it ends in September, and the October 1st is the beginning of the new fiscal year. Yeah.
So get this done before an October 1st start. A possibility.
Yeah. But the thing is, though, it's not up to Disney, though. Totally. It's.
Oh, I know, but they're one of the biggest players.
That's true. Alia, what do you think? What do you think about this?
This one, it depends on how important as silly as it seems, but we know that recognition and awards mean a lot to people in Hollywood. So it depends on how important the Emmys are, because the Emmys are, I remember Bellany explaining one of the podcasts, and I think even in his book, the Emmys are WGA adjacent. They can't go on without the WGA because they write things involved with the show and blah, blah, blah. So it hinges on how important the Emmys are to the industry. The Emmys are like the last thing on their mind, then it won't matter. But if the Emmys are kind of like this focal point, we want the Emmys to happen, then it's likely. I would give that a 50-50.
Okay, interesting. And now we have the December scenario. Everyone, including the streamers, begin to run out of scripted programs. The substitutes and unscripted fare aren't generating equivalent viewership, and people start canceling subscriptions. Both sides panic, get together, and make a deal. The December scenario, Dre, what do you think about it? This is the apocalypse scenario, basically.
Yeah, I'd be really shocked if this is still going on in December. I would think the dam has to break at that point, because now we're looking at huge disruptions to all kinds of stuff. And again, the you know, these streamers are set up in such a way that there are certain timelines that must be achieved in order to retain as many subscribers as possible. I would think that might impact that to a certain degree. And now we're talking, well, we know how subscribers show up in in Wall Street calculations in terms of early trading, right? I mean, that's a huge impact right there. So I would think it'd be handled by December, but I mean, it's not outside the realm of possibility. I would think, though, in like, to speed up these things, a work stoppage might actually speed these up a lot, so that we don't have to get to September or December. That might be the one silver lining in all of that. But if this is really drawn out, and and maybe some of these other unions don't actually strike in the same way that the WGA is, then this could be drawn out.
Yeah, interesting. What do you think, Ali, a December scenario?
Well, the rumors are that Netflix is the one in the most stubborn in the studio negotiation, and yeah, that's the rumors, and that they're boasting and claiming that they have enough material to ride this out, but some are doubting that, and I think even maybe September or December would be pushing it for them, because the way they would fill things up would be to get programs from other countries. And yes, that Squid Game was huge, but that's no assurance. That just might not be enough for a lot of viewers as they unsubscribe. I don't think even Netflix wants to take that risk, and even maybe perhaps the September risk. So I agree. December is least likely. But yes, that's the rumor. Netflix is the big stubborn holdout. And now the other studios are kind of locking arms with them, going along with it, but they're the ones that kind of started this whole mess too. What's interesting?
Yeah,
the streaming.
You gotta understand. I mean, everybody's got a streaming platform, right? You have to prevent churn, you know, and this whittling away process of these streaming networks is still occurring and still ongoing. You know, you don't want to necessarily speed that up if you're not the ones that are going to be left at the end of the day. So yeah, I mean, this could have problems. How does this impact also too the Hulu deal as well?
Right.
You know, does it become more valuable because it has a repository of content that people watch and people, you know, rewatch and so forth, or does it become less valuable because new shows aren't added? That's an interesting equation right there. That could change the game, but it doesn't surprise me, Netflix being the biggest holdout. I mean, it's so convenient just have billions and billions and billions worth of venture capital at your disposal. Oh.
Well, and the Hulu deal is already kind of being shaken up with the sex scandal with Universal's Jeff Shell and him getting booted out. That whole situation changed the dynamic. I still think at the end of the day, though, I do believe I still think they're going to work a deal out. I think there is something afoot behind the scenes, and Comcast will ultimately snatch up Hulu. But that's kind of how I feel. But I mean, it's anyone's guess. What are your thoughts, Ali? I know you have thoughts on the Hulu stuff and all that.
Please.
I think with Hulu deal, I think if it's something Roberts really wanted, but he just didn't want to communicate with Disney, he wanted someone else, especially Iger, you know, because he and Iger have a thing.
Yeah.
A dislike, but as long as he can find someone else to do the conversation and the negotiations, if he really wants it to happen, then it'll still go forward. And then as far as the lack of product, I mean, who knows? Silver lining for Comcast might be, oh, this is a way, you know, cleanse out all the Disney stuff. We get our stuff in once we can start production and all that. So if they really want Hulu, I think it'll still happen.
Yeah, I agree. I think at the end of the day, I still think it'll happen. Now, let's dive into our next topic, because this is a big weekend for Marvel. Guardians of the Galaxy 3 dropped just a couple of days ago, and we got some box office numbers. Okay, so this is from Luis Fernando, and he is saying Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 grossed a solid $114 million 3-day opening weekend at U.S. box office. Now, Guardians 1 made $94 million. Now, this is all domestic. Guardians 1 made $94.3 million. Guardians 2 made $146.5 million. So this is the number 10 biggest post-COVID over the rise of Gru, which was $107 million. the number 2 biggest of 2023, beating Quantumania, 106.1 million, and the 58th biggest of all time, beating Toy Story 3's 110 million. Dre, thoughts on this opening weekend for Guardians 3?
Well, some of those comparisons are a little bit outdated, but, but all right, okay, I get what you're saying here.
Yeah, kind of weird. Toy Story 3. That's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a little while. That's a little while, but yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So, Guardians of the Galaxy, with a $94 million opening, not surprising given that was, this was when it first opened in 2014. Man, it's been a long time. It was relative. I mean, it's nobody knew about it. Like nobody knew what to make of these guys being added to the MCU. Now they did have the MCU brand behind it for sure, but it was still very much well known with a director that wasn't even nearly as prominent as he is today. So it was like, how is that going to actually do? 94 million makes sense. 146, obviously, the first one was such a, just did gangbusters business for the studio that one could assume that 3 years later in 2017 that it go up substantially, and it did. 146. 114 is very, very interesting because you would have thought that it would have maybe matched the opening of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, especially with the the amount of movie ticket and so forth. And I mean, we do have films that have come out, obviously, that have performed big, but they've been out for a while, so you would have thought that the lack of competition, all of that, people would have actually gone out. 114 is solid, it's decent, but it's kind of startling to see that people didn't rush to actually go see this in a way that maybe previous MCU films they would have, and I think that speaks to a couple of things going on here. One of those being that I think the Marvel MCU is kind of I think in the minds of audiences, it's not quite the quality powerhouse that it had been ever since Endgame. Now, I am hearing amazing reviews on this specific film, and I think that's what audiences were waiting for. They were waiting for, is this one worth rushing out and seeing? If we compare this to maybe like Doctor Strange 2, for example, Multiverse of Madness, people rushed out, saw that one because they were on the high of Endgame, the high of No Way Home, and so forth. But now I think there's a little bit more, let's say, apprehension, at least initially, right? Let's just see how, like you said, Ollie, and I'll go ahead and throw it to you here, how the normies, my normie friends, feel about it before actually rushing out to see it. Look, great word of mouth, a cinema score. I think it's even higher with audiences than it is with critics on Rotten Tomatoes and so forth. This thing, I think, will leg out in a way that's maybe we don't necessarily see with other MCU films, but I think it will lay out. Go ahead, Ollie. I think your point on this was fascinating.
Well, so in a vacuum, a movie on its opening weekend needs to pass 2 hurdles. First would be the worldwide opening weekend needs to match or exceed the production budget. It did that. Production budget's 250. It made about, what was it?
282.
282. So check. And then next would be a cinema score in the A range. A minus being the lowest. It got the A. So check. So check. It did that. The tracking website Quorum that I found out about it from Matt Bellany had it listed as the highest tracked movie based on frequent and infrequent moviegoers thus far. And so, but I think it didn't quite reflect in the opening weekend, perhaps, of interesting presumptions from the normie general audience. So week performance coming up during the work week will be the most interesting and important. Maybe they thought there'd be a rush of people. They wanted to avoid the crowds, dealt that with Mario. It was important with the kids, but now this one can kind of wait. Maybe they wanted to see what their other normie or Marvel friends thought of it. So I think if otherwise, then tracking is a mess and needs to be not paid attention to as much because it was tracking high. But I think that might be the explanation for that. So how it performs during the week coming up will be telling. I think a big sign that Marvel and Disney, or perhaps Marvel and Disney just lets Marvel do what they want here, a sign that they're not happy with this if they release to the trades the Fantastic Four cast, or at least for Reed and Storm. Is that Sue Storm?
Yeah, Sue Storm.
Yeah, right. The rumors are it's Adam Driver and brain freeze with her name. Plays Harley and Barbie.
Yes.
Those are the rumors that they got solidified as the top two. So those are what the top scoopers are saying. But if the trades come out with that this week, then that would be a squirrel diversion. That means Marvel's a little bit kind of concerned about this opening weekend. Otherwise, though, I don't think that's going to be officially announced until maybe the week when Fast X comes out, all the way up to San Diego. The trades.
I am so sorry, Alio. I am so sorry. We lost you. We lost you after San Diego Comic-Con. Sorry about that.
Okay. So if that news is revealed by the trades, the official reveal by the trades this week, then that means that Marvel's concerned about this opening weekend side diversion. But if it comes out the week of Fast X all the way up to San Diego Comic-Con, then that means I think they're happy with this. So
I think the studios really, I think internally, I think it's really testing well. I think the studio's proud of it because they were putting on a series of fan screenings for free, by the way. I think that's what... to
build the buzz.
I think our buddy Ethan was invited to one of those. And, to kind of get that buzz out there, like I said, before the film actually came out. I think these were, right around the time that they were actually giving it out to... they were showing screenings for the press and so forth. So, you don't do stuff like that unless you're proud of a work like this, unless you're confident that there will be, kind of good word of mouth and buzz generating from what you're actually doing. So I think that's also telling as well about how the studio feels about this film. Yeah, it didn't, supersede, I guess, the domestic or international haul from the previous one, but I think it'll leg out. I really do.
Me too.
I think this is really getting good word of mouth. People are going back for second screenings because of the experience they had the first time. I know I'm seeing it tomorrow, actually, myself. So we'll have more of a breakdown on the film itself because I think our buddy George actually saw it too. He had some thoughts and so forth. I think OG, you're gonna be able to see it, hopefully sometime soon. So we'll definitely have a breakdown of this film specifically. But it's generating that good word of mouth that you want to see.
Yeah.
And as an aside, Mario fell more than 50% for the weekend from the previous weekend. So it's not like a Top Gun Maverick. Some thought maybe, this is like the animated Top Gun Maverick, who had holds less than 50% week after week until all the way into October. But it fell more than 50%. So it's not quite the animated equivalent of Top Gun Maverick either.
No.
Too, for the 40th anniversary Return of the Jedi screenings that were held recently, I know my theater bumped Mario.
Oh, wow.
From one of their PLFs for Return of the Jedi. So that's
early weakness, sign of early weakness. Interesting.
Very
interesting stuff. Yeah, I think there's a lot of things going on here that's interesting. I think that with Guardians, obviously Marvel as a franchise is in a completely different place in 2023 than it was in 2017 when the second one came out. Obviously, I think Marvel, the MCU was in a stronger place in 2017. So that is obviously a contributing factor to lower numbers maybe than the second one. But the thing that I think this movie has one thing big going for it that I think can't be ignored, in that from what I'm hearing, this is a very I don't want to say isolated movie, but it's very much a Guardians movie. This isn't doing a lot of setup for some future thing in the MCU. It's a Guardians movie. This wraps up the trilogy, a nice little bow. I think that's going to work in his favor.
Yes, I do agree.
Because if people are disappointed in the recent content coming out of the MCU, and they're hearing this one is it's its own contained little thing, I think that's going to help it quite a bit.
I won't be surprised if normies think the High Evolutionary is a variant of King. So there's just some thought that if majors can't work out, maybe video because
that's
I mean the
interesting.
suit is also purple and he's got same kind of powers. So I wouldn't be surprised if normies are like, wait a
Ooh.
second, just because it comes after Ant-Man, we're in the multiverse saga. I mean, even though it is isolated, I wouldn't, because it was even in my, my mind, I thought like, so I wouldn't be surprised if normies are like, maybe,
Well,
Don't
maybe
worry, Ollie,
Disney.
a lot of people didn't see Quantum Mania, so we're fine. It's still nice.
Well,
I mean,
that's interesting though. Like, at least from what you're, and I haven't seen the movie, but from what you're seeing, Alia, is that this new villain could work as a replacement to Jonathan Majors, and maybe
actor,
Marvel is seeing that.
I'm not quite sure how to pronounce his name. That's why I'm hesitant to say it. Shielty Ejiofor. I'm probably completely butchering it. And as a person with a unique ethnic name, I apologize. I understand how that feels. But it's just, there's just, I wouldn't be surprised if it's like in the back of the minds of even the normies general audience. Like, is this a variant of Kang? He's got a purple suit and he's got powers that are kind of the same from the suit. So it's just, if Majors doesn't work out, that it would be interesting then if Marvel's kind of considering that too. So
well, it looks like there's a contingency, maybe perhaps in place here.
And I've seen others floating it on Twitter, and the reply seems like 80-20, like those that are really into the lore of the comics and stuff are like, it can't work. But like, when does that matter to MCU, Marvel, and normies? So
it doesn't matter, and you have to it doesn't matter, and you have to sort of address the reality on the ground. Reality on the ground is Jonathan Majors is going through it in his personal life, and they're going to have to
dates tomorrow. His first court
boy. Oh, OG55, what a legal update. There we go. From the courtroom, guys.
But yeah, that's the reality on the ground. I mean, there's question marks about him. Yes.
To say the least. Yeah, exactly. And Marvel's probably looking for an escape door to get out of that,
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be surprised, Ollie, if they go your route, what you're suggesting. If it works, it works, and yeah.
I think the other thing is this is James Gunn's last production with the MCU, so I think a lot of people are like, ooh, they kind of.
He needed a win too this weekend, personally. I mean, if Guardians faltered, cinema score less than A-, opening weekend worldwide less than the production budget, it would have affected his standing in Hollywood personally as the future head of DC. So that's what some don't realize. It wasn't just a judgment on Marvel; it's a judgment on him and his future with DC.
His viability. And I was talking to OG about this. I mean, Marvel hasn't done anything that's not reversible, right? I mean, they haven't even hit production with any of their future DC content with this kind of James Gunnian universe, right? So they could have fired him. and Zazzy, I mean, he obviously you'd be letting go of.
Oh, that's a good point. If the opening weekend was a bomb, you're right. He could have been fired. And Safran could have just been the lead, or Zazzy might have rethought the whole thing. That's a good point.
Exactly, right? So
there's a lot.
This really puts the wind in his sails for sure for the viability of future content coming out of DC right there, and his position in the studio. But it was kind of fascinating. I really hadn't thought about that until OG brought it to my attention a couple days ago. But Alia, thank you for bringing that up for here, because that's a really interesting.
Well, actually, I can't take credit for that because I got it from Alia. So.
Oh, there you go. Okay, yeah. There you go.
I'm the origin.
There we go. We're just
now. What do you think the holds might be for this thing?
The holds. What do you think, Alia? What do you feel? What are you thinking for weekend to weekend
drop?
Yeah.
Oh, I think it'll be 50% or less. My fingers are crossed. If not. I know with tentpole kind of event films, fall of 64% or less is considered okay. It's the concerning sign is 65% or more, but I think it's going to be 50% or less.
Yeah, I agree with the word of mouth. I don't think it's going to drop that much. What do you think, Dre?
I think I'd be shocked if it drops more than 60%. That would be really like, that's not good, because now, maybe your domestic box office wasn't like, as much as you were wanting it to be. Maybe it's got a high production budget. They probably spent a lot of money on ads and so forth. So it's like, I would be shocked, and that would be like, warning bells. But I don't think so. With this kind of cinema score and these kind of reviews and stuff like that, I would think 45, something like that.
Yeah.
But
And nothing huge opening next week. So yeah, they have the theaters pretty much, especially the premium ones, till May 19th or 18th with Fast X. So
okay, so that gives them some time.
Yeah, it does. Now, I want to touch upon James Gunn just for a moment because I'm actually kind of impressed by him recently. This is one thing that I really like about this guy lately is that he's been emphasizing, like, hey, you know, Marvel and DC, they don't hate each other. Like,
I love that.
Yes, like he's expressed that, like, you know, we're friends behind the scenes. We want each other to do well because it helps everybody, right?
It really does.
This is one thing though that really frustrates me with the theme park stuff is that Universal's constantly throwing shots at Disney. I wish they would just get off of that and and be more like Gunn. Let's work together, y'all. Like, why is it always got to be so much animosity? You know what I'm saying? And look, I know Brian Roberts hates Bob Iger and vice versa, but I'm just burnt. I'm just burnt out on that whole thing. I wish there would be more of the Gunnism, so to speak, of like, hey, you know what? We're competitors, but at the same time, we got this mutual respect for each other, and you doing good is good for me, and vice versa. I just wish we would see more of that in the theme park world. And hats off to James Gunn for doing that because. I think it's good for fandom too, you know, not to stoke that animosity amongst the fans, you know. So I don't know. Kudos to him for that. I think that was big of him. And also he's even hinted in those sound bites that maybe DC and Marvel might even do a movie together or a crossover movie.
It's interesting how much he's reiterated that there's no, you know, bad blood between us. Come on, rising tide lifts all boats kind of thing. It's interesting how much he's reiterated that. With that kind of nugget of information that maybe there might be a crossover here coming up, and honestly, that might not be a bad idea for both franchises. Go ahead, Alia.
Sorry, I just I got how to properly pronounce the actor's name who plays the High Evolutionary, Chikudi Iwuji. So
there we go.
I wanted to. It's important to me. I know. I understand as a person with the unique ethnic names.
100%, no question.
And especially if he becomes the new king, then.
Yeah, we're gonna be
curtsy to him and everything. Exactly.
Exactly.
Now,
No. Go ahead, Ray. I'm sorry.
Well, what do we think the viability of something like a crossover being now? Because you have this
Viking Gunn being friends,
right? You've got because from what I understand, James Gunn and Kevin Feige are still in good terms. They still talk, from what I understand. I mean, do we think this is a viable thing here? Because this happened in the comics sometimes, and wasn't there like a series of games also released where they, you know, crossed over and so forth like that?
Perhaps. I mean, rumor is that Robbie became the most likely Sue Storm because Gunn appealed to Feige, knowing that Robbie would say yes because he couldn't keep his promise to bring her back anytime soon, if ever, as Harley. And so it's kind of to make it up to her. So that's the rumor. And so it could go beyond that. But yes, that in some way there could be a form of a crossover. Who knows? Maybe something's going to be worked out for Secret Wars. Never know.
Oh, well, and you know, look, right now the Avatar franchise, like the king, right? Like, you know, Way of Water, over 2 billion. Yeah. But they do that, they make a Marvel DC movie. I'm telling you, it's going for that crown. That's gonna that has $2 billion potential. Absolutely.
Oh, gosh,
maybe 3 billion. Yeah.
That would be absolutely insane. You really put out some characters who are, you know, well liked, well beloved on both sides. I know DC has had a problem with that recently, but you know, maybe James Gunn can overcome that, and you have it culminate towards something big like that. That would be absolutely massive. Now, I would assume that it would have to be one of those 50-50 splits down the middle, like we saw with Nintendo and Universal for Mario.
Definitely, it'll definitely be that. Yeah, and one would get domestic, one would get the international distribution. They'd work that out. I bet. So Disney would get one, Warner Brothers the other, and they'd work out who gets what. Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember during Who Framed Roger Rabbit, the negotiations for that was like Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny had to have the exact same screen time in that film, and I wouldn't be surprised if Marvel and DC have a similar arrangement where, like, you know, each of their characters has to have a certain amount of screen time, and they negotiate all that in the terms. It's gonna be fascinating, but I really want to see that.
Superman and Iron Man have to have the same level of screen time. Batman
Right.
and Captain America have to have the same levels. So are we getting pair ups?
Most likely.
Right.
That'd be the easiest way to do it.
Yeah, that would be just like the Mickey Mouse Bugs Bunny thing.
Exactly. So it's fascinating. Interesting time we live in. Interesting time between the writer strike, Guardians 3 box office. A ton to talk about here, but I want to thank you both for coming on and talking shop with me. I'll start with you, Alia. If you could let everybody at home know where they can find you on social media.
Of course. AliaaAloha on, oh, no, it's over there. I'm so bad. With AliaaAloha with Twitter, tweet. And apologies for any of the technical glitches. And I know it's understood, but still, I'd like to apologize. And also, thank you for inviting me. I enjoyed myself, even though I didn't quite know what I was talking about at times. It's still fun.
You were fantastic, as always. As always, a wealth of information, Alia. Thank you so much for coming on. We'll have you on again. And we got
when we were talking about doing this show before, I specifically was like, we gotta have Alia. We gotta have Alia because she really knows her stuff on this. So
he did. No, he did. Yeah, we were on the phone. He said, "We absolutely this is." Yep, he did. He absolutely said that. So it was a great privilege and honor to have you on, Alia. Thank you so much for talking shop with us.
Thank you,
Dr. Dre. If you can remind everybody home where they could find you on social media, sir.
Well, thank you. Best place to find me is going to be at VashSky on Twitter. It's right down there, right below the avatar, right there. Go ahead,
right there.
Type it in, and it should pop up for, as Christine Waysons McCarthy would say, for all the robust discussion right there. And if you want to see me, well, hey, you gotta give the viewers what they want.
Sure.
If you want to see me, you can go ahead and subscribe to the channel that you're watching right now at Orange Grove 55, where we have some amazing shows, including OrangeNerd, what you're watching right now. Citrus Corner, talking about everything Walt Disney World related. Story Geeks with Jay, talking about the stories that impact our lives. And including my own there. I think we have all of them. Freshly Squeezed, your source for news and info, squeezed fresh, right from the Grove.
There we go. Well, thank you all for watching today. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Comment down below with all your thoughts on everything we talked about. Guardians box office, the writer strike, AI, very fascinating stuff. I think we're going to be revisiting AI on a lot of videos going forward. I think it's going to be a big story in Hollywood, so keep an eye on the AI.
Well, I know a lot of creative industries are, that's for sure.
I got to be careful with that. Now everybody's going to think you're Illuminati. Sorry.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
No. Illuminati evil.
There we go.
I don't go quite into conspiracy theories.
Well, we do have we do have AI OG55 crew though, right?
Like, no, absolutely. I agree with you. They're like mirrored to each other.
So you never know.
I'm that little cute one on the bottom there. The W for winner. I know.
And by the way, I just want to give a credit and a shout out to Captain John D. He is the one responsible for that little.
Thank you. You're awesome.
Thank you,
John D.
John D is awesome. We love John D.
Yeah.
Yes, always sailing the seven seas.
We should have that intro, just just for.
You know what, Alia? I like where your mind's at. Let's go ahead and play the Captain John D drop before we go.
Absolutely.
There we go. A little shout out to Captain.
That's how much we adore you, Captain John D.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you all for watching. And as always, have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye-bye, everybody.
フォースと共にあらんこと